Why isn't the British government taking a stand on the Israeli government's violation of international law, its continued expansion of settlements, its brutal occupation of the Palestinian people? John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, did a speech which condemned Israel for its policies. He said,
"This current coalition is the most right-wing in Israeli history, with an agenda driven by the most extreme elements.
The status quo," he said,
"is leading towards one state and perpetual occupation."
Now, of course, the UN Security Council has just passed a resolution condemning Israel for construction of settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as a flagrant violation under international law, posing a threat to peace in the region. This time, the US didn't veto it, so it passed 14-0. Now, all of this should have happened years ago. I mean, it's all well and good, isn't it, being a president, as Obama has been for the last 8 years, the last superpower on earth, a country in which the Israeli government is completely dependent on for military aid, for diplomatic support. Now Obama's on his way out, now he does something. Great, 2 thumbs up there. So what did Theresa May's government do? Not stand with the US administration, belatedly standing up for international law and peace. I know these are old-fashioned concepts, but call me old-fashioned. No, instead she decided to criticise them and side with Donald Trump. That's the best response her government can come up to a speech which, yes, should have been made years ago, which actually tries to put pressure on Israel to abide by its international commitments, not least stopping the seizure illegally of Palestinian land. So on the one hand, she stands with Benjamin Netanyahu, who's currently under investigation in Israel for alleged corruption, who does head, objectively, the most right-wing government in Israeli history, but Donald Trump as well. Donald Trump via Twitter, because that's now how, by the way, international diplomacy will be conducted, just so we're aware. It will be President-elect Donald Trump issuing slightly wacky statements via Twitter. And he said, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such disdain and disrespect. Stay strong, Israel. January the 20th is fast approaching." Pretty ominous. Now, who's this colossal doofus appointed as his prospective ambassador to Israel? It's a guy called David Freeman, bankruptcy lawyer, eminently qualified then, good, ambassador, who's attacked Obama for blatant anti-Semitism, and this is just beyond offensive and beyond disturbing. He said that American Jews who support Palestinian justice are worse than capos. Now, capos, if you don't know what they were, well, during the Holocaust, yeah, he's gone there, were Jews who were used by the Nazi genocidal authorities during the extermination of the Jewish people as functionaries to do certain tasks for them. So he said about J Street, which is an organisation, a very commendable, courageous organisation of American Jews for Justice in the United States, he said of them, "Are J Street supporters really as bad as capos?" The answer actually is no. They are far worse than capos. Jews who turned in their fellow Jews in the death camps. The capos faced extraordinary cruelty, and who knows what any of us would have done under those circumstances to save a loved one. But J Street, they are just smug advocates of Israel's destruction delivered from the comfort of their secure American sofas. It's hard to imagine anyone worse. Now, Friedman is a hardcore supporter of Israeli settlements. The continued existence of these settlements will mean there will never be a lasting, secure peace in the Middle East. Now, in theory, even Israel's extreme government supports a two-state solution. But in practice now, Donald Trump's also extremist government is about to take power. We can see that just disappearing. And it will be the construction of a one-state, which will mean the permanent subjugation of the Palestinian people and the deprivation of their basic right to national self-determination, to have a nation of their own. Just to put it in perspective, about 10% now of Israel's Jewish population are settlers either in the West Bank or East Jerusalem. They've expanded at a massive rate. There are about 130 settlements in the West Bank alone now. These settlements, of course, make it impossible for Palestine ever to be an independent, viable state. Now, I know what's going to happen now. People are going to go, hold on a minute, Owen, what about Hamas? Obviously, I condemn Hamas and their actions. Sometimes you get this thing called whataboutery. What it means basically is, look over there. Why aren't you condemning all these other things in the world? Lots of people go, well, what about North Korea? They're not ideal, are they? They're far worse than what the Israeli government does. And that is, of course, absolutely correct. The issue is our own direct complicity. The West is not supporting and arming the North Korean dictatorship. A few months ago, I did a video on this channel, and it was about British support for the Saudi-led bombing of Yemen. And the point about that, about highlighting that issue, is we can do something about it. The British government treats the head-chopping Saudi dictator as a close ally. That ally is dropping bombs on the civilian population of Yemen. Now, what we do as citizens who put pressure on our government and the government itself, well, could play a critical role in what happens in Yemen and what the Saudis do. And the same applies to Israel. It's not about singling the Israeli state and the Israeli government out. Obviously, there are lots of abhorrent regimes on the face of the earth, many of which are worse than the Israeli government. But we do have a responsibility to speak out, in particular, about governments, about regimes, about states, which we as the West directly support and arm because we are complicit in their behaviour and what they do. With Donald Trump as president, Britain could actually have quite a courageous and special role. Rather than just blindly following his foreign policy, which we really should have nothing to do with, we should have our own independent line, where we speak out and put pressure on the Israeli government to cease its illegal settlements, which mean there will never be peace. And that's what we all should want. You know, we should want a peace which gives security and safety to Jews and Arabs alike. That means self-determination for the Palestinian people. It means an end to a brutal occupation which has taken so many lives, and the vast majority of deaths in the occupation, the Israeli occupation of Palestine, of course, have been Palestinians. And obviously the citizens of Israel deserve and need, as a basic right, security and freedom from rocket attacks and bombings. The life of a Palestinian and the life of an Israeli citizen should be treated equally. But we will never get that security and peace as long as Western powers, led by the United States, are so chronically biased in favour of a state which is illegally occupying Palestinian land. So I think we all have a responsibility as citizens to put pressure on our government, whether it be Israel, whether it be the Saudis, states and governments and regimes which are acting partly in our name, in which, you know, their behaviour is something that we are responsible, partly we're complicit in as countries. I mean, when you talk about Israel and Palestine, the debate is well known to be very calm and reasoned, so I'm very much looking forward to read those comments. But seriously, I want to hear your thoughts. I think this is a terrible situation which obviously needs to come to an end. So let's resolve it in my comment section. I mean, I think after decades of international failure, we can definitely sort it out on my YouTube channel. So I want to hear your thoughts. Where do we go from now? What next for peace? Is there any hope now? Is this just the end of any hopes for peace now? Donald Trump, oh, is he going to become president of the United States? Worth letting that settle in. So leave your comments as ever. Subscribe. I'll see you next time.